G'day from Rootstech 2013. This morning I have with me Audrey Collins. Audrey Collins is quite well known down under, but she's not an Aussie. She comes from the mother country. Audrey did a wonderful tour of Australia last year, and we really enjoyed seeing her on the tour, and I actually hosted her in my home. We had a wonderful time. And I'm pleased Audrey's giving us some time this morning to tell us about why she came to Rootstech, about what she does at the National Archives in the UK, and about her blog. Audrey, where shall we start?
Well, do we start with the blog?
We'll start with the blog.
I started doing my genealogy blog almost a couple of years ago now. Actually, thanks to my first genie godmother, dear Myrtle. Got me started.
Yeah.
And I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it. Technically, I knew how to set it up, but I wasn't sure what I was going to write about. But I think after a few posts, you find your voice.
Yes.
And what I decided to do was write things that were about genealogy. That's about the only criterion. But there's things that interested me. Sometimes they're really quite trivial. Sometimes it's some important resource or just something that I find interesting. I'm not a news hound. I don't do breaking news like Chris Payton, who is the big British blogger. But I just do interesting bits and pieces.
Some of your pieces are thoroughly researched, especially those you do on retail history.
Oh,
why?
That's my favourite. In a former life, I was going to have this brilliant career in retail management, and I worked for a department store group, John Lewis partnership. Now accidentally committed motherhood about 2.5 years into this, so the brilliant career went on hold and actually disappeared altogether. But I have an abiding interest and love for department stores in particular and retailing generally. So combined with my other first love, which is history of shops, is just fascinating, and I love everything to do with it.
And your blog posts are fascinating too, the blog posts. They may be on things that don't interest me, but because they're interesting in the way you write them,
thank you.
They just resonate. So what was the address of your blog again?
It's called The Family Recorder.
The Family Recorder.
And it's on Blogger. So if you just Google The Family Recorder,
we'll find it.
Blog, you'll find it.
Okay, so you started your career in retail, motherhood intervened. Now you work in genealogy. How did you get from motherhood to genealogy?
Well, it's not what you'd call a career path.
Oh, okay.
If you were trying to follow my career path, you'd look like you were drunk. But I did a whole variety of things which have all come together, and they've all equipped me for the job I've got now. Working in retail, I spent quite a lot of the time working in customer accounts, where you had to look at indexes on microfiche, decipher people's dreadful writing, and generally try to make sense of stuff. So there are a lot more transferable skills than you might at first think. Genealogy was something I'd always been quite interested in. When I was 13, I asked my parents about their aunts and uncles and grandparents, because I knew about my aunts and uncles and grandparents. I figured they knew about theirs. And I wrote down those trees in the exercise book where I copied out all the royal genealogies that I saw in encyclopedias. I don't have the book anymore, but I do have the pages at the back with my first trees on. Did nothing with them for 20 years, but there was bits of information on there that I'd got from my dad, who passed away before I started genealogy proper, that came in really handy later on.
So you've had that interest since you were a teenager. When did you actually join the industry?
Well, it was 1987, and flicking through the evening class brochures, and it was, the evening that I was free, what with childcare and so forth, and it was picture framing or genealogy. And I went for genealogy. And look where I ended up.
So you worked as a private researcher?
To begin with, I was just an amateur, and then I realised that
like
I
me.
could...
Yeah.
Well, you're an amateur in the truest sense of the word. Because you love genealogy as I do. And then I realised that I could actually make a little bit of an income. In those days, no internet and no remote access to copies of indexes. If you lived within reach of London, as I did, you could be a gopher. You could go and order copies of birth, marriage and death certificates. You could go and get copies of census returns without being a great genealogist, if you just knew how to use an index and order documents. you could do that. So I thought this is a good way of financing my interest, and it's work that I can fit in around school hours. And then after a bit of doing that, I went to the evening class, obviously, and then I went on and did a more high-level class at Birkbeck College, where my tutor was somebody called Jeff Swinfield, who is actually here at Rootstech at the moment. No shaking off some people. He was a great teacher. And I became a bit more expert, and I started doing proper casework. And then I was approached by a company called Windsor Ancestry, who did casework, and it was the best of all possible worlds. They used to give me the research to do. They dealt with the clients. They wrote the reports. They dealt with the accounts. So I just got to do the fun stuff. And I got such a wide range of experience that I really learned a lot. And I did that for about 10, 15 years. And then I really needed a steady job because I was getting divorced and I needed a regular income stream. And I was so incredibly lucky that a part-time job of a reader advisor came up at the Family Records Centre, which no longer exists.
St Catherine's House, yes?
Well, no, that was between St Catherine's House.
Okay.
St Catherine's House was births, marriages and deaths.
Okay.
The census and some other key records were in either in the Chancery Lane Public Record Office building. Those two offices closed, and the core records, the births, marriages and deaths, census and some wills and some non-conformist records, they were in a new organisation called the Family Records Centre. That's now gone, but for about 10 years that was there in central London. And jobs there were like hen's teeth. It was a great place to work, and people just didn't leave. They might leave to get a big promotion to somewhere else, or they might retire, but they didn't leave. So the job came up at exactly the right time, and then I went full-time. And then when we moved to Kew and the Family Record Centre closed down, I got a promotion to a job which is not quite the one I do now, but it was on the same level. And then the vacancy came up for a family history specialist. And I can't wait to spend the rest of my working life doing that job.
It's a dream job, isn't it?
It is absolutely a dream job.
Now, you only have a small amount of what we call annual leave each year, and it's rather precious. And you've taken some of that annual leave to come to Rootstech. Why?
I get not too bad an amount of annual leave. It's better than the Americans get.
Oh, yeah.
But I do choose to use it because life and work and interest, they all blur into each other. And I came to the first Rootstech because I thought, that looks interesting.
That's where we met.
It is indeed. It was at the planetarium at the front of my past night, I think, over a bowl of popcorn. And I thought, that looks interesting. I'd been to Salt Lake once before, but had not very much time. And I thought, I want to have another crack at that library. And this looks like a really interesting conference. So I came, and it was great. It was really exciting. Well, you remember, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
And I was very lucky that I won a really terrific door prize. To my great surprise, I filled in this card to get a free T-shirt. I forgot there were prizes. And it was only when David Renshaw pulled my name out of the drawer and said that I'd won a 7-night stay at the Salt Lake Plaza. Oh boy, I'm very rarely speechless, but I was for a minute then. So that was it. I had to come back for Rootstech 2.
And you came back again for
Well,
Rootstech
it's habit
3.
forming.
But what do you get out of Rootstech?
It's the people. It's ironic, isn't it? There's so much online, and we live stream and we talk on Twitter and we participate internationally on events, but there's nothing quite like coming and meeting people face to face. And I don't think the two cancel each other out. You don't not go to events because you can view it at home. You still want to go to the things that you want to go to, but it just means that there is an option if you can't come. But this is one event. This is my must not miss event. If I can possibly afford it, I will come to Rootstech every year it's going, because it's just so much fun and so many friends, new friends and old friends.
Audrey, thank you so much for spending some time telling us about your history, because I think the people in Australia and other people who've heard you speak probably don't know the background to Audrey, and it's always nice, just like with family history, to add a bit of meat to the bones.
Well, there's plenty of that. Thanks, Jill.